I can't wait to see what your parents will do to you after this, Jungkook murmured with his jaw clenched before he started taking off his jacket. He stared at Yin's face closely, then leaned in, their faces just inches apart. Yin was nearly unconscious. Let's have fun tonight until morning, he said in a low voice before their lips finally met. Their first kiss finally happened. Yin responded even as her consciousness began to fade. Jungkook's emotions were a swirl of confusion, his eyes shut, the kiss deepening but feeling painfully heavy on his heart. After a few minutes, Jungkook pulled away from their kiss. Meanwhile, Yin smiled and unconsciously murmured, "Jungkook, I love you so much. You're the only source of my happiness. Please don't leave me." Jungkook froze, feeling each word from Yin's lips stab at his heart. He took a deep breath, trying to hold back the emotions that were starting to surface. His confusion was growing stronger. He knew this was all part of the game, a plan that had been carefully set in motion. Yet, Yin's words made him hesitate for a moment. Slowly, he gazed at Yin's face, which appeared so vulnerable in her semi-conscious state. A faint smile adorned her face, but behind that smile, Jungkook could see the sincerity that made him feel more and more trapped. His heart trembled, but he knew he couldn't back out now. "Jungkook," Yin murmured again, this time more softly, "don't leave me, I'm scared." Jungkook stared at her, feeling like his heart was being torn apart. He felt the contradiction within himself, between the feelings that were growing and the plan he had been executing so thoroughly. He shook his head firmly, his gaze, which had softened moments ago, sharpening once more, his jaw tightening. Slowly, his fingers reached for the buttons on Yin's shirt, his expression blank. "I won't leave you, because I'm going to make you suffer," he muttered, and soon after, he kissed Yin again, this time with all his emotions. Not long after, his kiss moved to her neck, and after that, Jungkook truly carried out his mission for the night. A few hours later, Jungkook still couldn't sleep. His body and mind were exhausted. Beside him, Yin was fast asleep, even snoring slightly. Jungkook glanced at the clock, 7 a.m., but his eyes were still wide awake. He had no idea how long he had been staring at Yin's face since earlier. Yin woke up with a deep sense of confusion. Her head felt heavy, her body tired, and her vision was still blurry, with some parts of her body feeling sore. As her eyes fully opened, she was shocked to find herself on bed, covered by a thick blanket with Jungkook. Their bodies were both only covered by the same blanket, and the distance between them was so close. Yin's heart raced. She felt like she was trapped in a real-life nightmare. Her emotions were mixed, confused, scared, and embarrassed. With her body still trembling slightly, Yin slowly sat up, realizing this was not a dream. "Jungkook, what happened?" Yin's voice was hoarse, almost unable to believe what she was seeing. Jungkook looked at her with his face remaining calm. He took a deep breath. "We didn't realize it. We were both drunk last night," Jungkook said in a calm tone, trying to reassure her. "We must have been out of our senses, and everything happened so quickly. I'm sure we didn't mean for this to happen." Yin stared at Jungkook, trying to process his words, but the feeling of discomfort continued to linger in her heart. "So, we didn't realize? All of this was unintentional?" Jungkook nodded slowly. "Yes, it all happened by accident." Yin nodded slowly as well, although there was a deep doubt in her eyes. I'm confused, Jungkook. This all feels like a dream, but it's reality. What if I'm pregnant after this?" Yin asked anxiously, her worry growing. "If you're pregnant, then I'll marry you." Instantly, his answer seemed to calm Yin down, at least for the moment. Yin returned home with heavy steps, her heart still filled with anxiety and confusion. As soon as she opened the door, her father was already standing in the living room, waiting, with an expression that clearly showed his anger. His face was dark, his eyes sharp, as if flames were burning behind them. "Where have you been all night?" His voice was loud, filled with anger that demanded an answer. "Do you think I wouldn't know? You should have been home last night, Yin." Yin swallowed hard, searching for the right words, but her mind went blank. She knew her father would be furious if he found out the truth, and she wasn't ready to tell him what had really happened. "Dad, Yin stopped, struggling to get the words out, fear tightening around her. But her father didn't give her a chance to explain. In just a few steps, he was in front of her, and without warning, he struck her back with force. His strong hand felt like lightning searing through Yin's skin, making her stumble forward and nearly fall. "You disgrace," he spat, his voice rising even more. "Do you think I'll let you bring shame to this family? You're completely worthless." Yin couldn't say anything. Her body felt frozen, her heart crushed by the sudden outburst. Every word from her father's mouth was like a knife slicing through her. Tears threatened to fall, but she held them back. She knew he wouldn't care. Go to your bedroom, he barked, pointing towards the stairs. I don't want to see you here again. With a stiff and exhausted body, Yin walked slowly up the stairs. The lower part of her body still ached, especially as she climbed each step. And now, with the added pain from her father's blow, she winced in silence. As soon as she entered her room, she quietly closed the door and slid down to the floor. Yin sat there, motionless. She had tried running away from this house several times, but she had never succeeded. Her father always managed to find her, and when he did, her body had to endure the consequences. Sometimes she thought it would be easier if she just disappeared, but deep down, a tiny part of her still wanted to live. She wanted happiness. She had no dreams left, no one to rely on. All she wanted was for her father to one day let her go and never look for her again. Her thoughts drifted back to last night. For over a year, she had been secretly in a relationship with Jungkook, without her father's knowledge. And without Jungkook knowing about her life here, she wasn't ready to tell him. She was afraid of how he would see her if he found out. And about last night, she just hoped no further problems would arise. They had both been drunk. No one was to blame. That's what Yin kept telling herself, with the little memory she had left. But 1 month later, Yin sat on the edge of her bed, gripping a pregnancy test strip tightly in both hands. 2 bold red lines stared back at her. Her breath hitched, her hands trembled, and tears began pooling in her eyes. This can't be happening, she whispered, her voice barely audible. A heavy weight pressed down on her chest, making her feel weak. Suddenly, the door burst open with a loud bang as the doorknob slammed against the wall. Yin flinched, hastily hiding the test strip behind her back. Standing in the doorway was her father, his face twisted in rage, his sharp gaze piercing straight through her. What the hell is wrong with you? Why have you been locking yourself in your room? He barked, his heavy footsteps echoing as he strode closer. Yin swallowed hard, her lips quivering, but no words came out. She knew her father had no patience. What are you hiding behind your back? He demanded coldly, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. Yin shook her head, stepping back slightly. Nothing. But her father wasn't stupid. In one rough motion, he grabbed her wrist and yanked her arm forward. The pregnancy test strip slipped from her grasp, falling onto the floor and rolling until it stopped at his feet. Silence. Time seemed to freeze. His eyes locked onto the small object before him, and in an instant, his expression twisted into something even more furious. His eyes widened, his breath quickened, and a deeper, more terrifying rage clouded his face. What is this? His voice boomed through the room. You're pregnant? Yin bit her lip, unable to answer. Her head hung low, and silent tears fell one by one. She had expected this. She knew her father would explode, but she still wasn't ready. Who? He roared again, leaning in dangerously close. Who's the bastard that did this to you? Yin sobbed quietly, clenching her fists in her lap. I. Speak, Yin. Don't test my patience. Shutting her eyes tightly, she gathered the last of her courage and whispered, Jungkook. Jungkook, who is he? He's my classmate, and I've been dating him for a long time. Listen to me, he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. That baby. Immediately, Yin's eyes widened. No, Dad, I won't. That child is useless. There's no reason for you to have it. I won't, this time. Her eyes burned with defiance. Her father's fury escalated, his face contorted with rage. If you refuse, then get the hell out of this house. Take nothing with you except your pathetic self. From this moment on, you are no longer my daughter. With that, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Yin clutched her stomach. Strangely, her father's threats didn't crush her. Instead, they felt like a weight being lifted from her chest. She had spent years trying to escape this house, searching for any way out. And now, she had finally been thrown out. This was her chance. For the first time in her life, hope flickered in her heart. That night, in a small cafe hidden in a quiet corner of Seoul, Yin sat anxiously in her seat. Her hands tightly gripped a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Her lips trembled, and her eyes stared blankly at the entrance. Every now and then, she took a deep breath, trying to calm the erratic beating of her heart. She was waiting for Jungkook, ready to talk about her pregnancy. When she called him earlier, he was still at his office, but promised to meet her at the cafe, their usual meeting place. Truthfully, Yin felt nervous and different this time. Ever since that night, they hadn't seen each other again. Now that they had graduated, things had changed. A week after graduation, Jungkook immediately started working at his stepfather's company. He had been incredibly busy, and Yin tried to be understanding about it. Suddenly, the cafe door chimed, and Yin quickly looked up. Jungkook had just entered, wearing a long black coat, his expression unreadable, unlike his usual self. His steps were firm and confident as he walked toward her. When he reached the table, he looked at Yin, as if bracing himself for whatever she was about to say. "What do you want to talk about?" he asked, pulling out the chair beside her and sitting down. Yin swallowed hard. She turned slightly to look at Jungkook before shifting her gaze back to her coffee cup. Her trembling hands tightened around it. I'm pregnant, Jungkook." For a moment, time seemed to stop. Jungkook stared at her intently, trying to read her expression, making sure this wasn't some kind of joke. "Pregnant?" he repeated, needing confirmation. Yin nodded slowly. "I've already checked. I'm really carrying your child." Silence filled the space between them. Jungkook stared at Yin, his gaze unreadable. Then, instead of panic or shock, his lips curved into a faint smile. Yin parted her lips, speaking in a quiet tone, intending to express the reason she had asked to meet him. "Do you want to marry me?" he suddenly said. Yin's eyes widened, startled that Jungkook had spoken the words she hadn't even finished saying. "What? Marriage?" Jungkook repeated firmly. "You're carrying my child, aren't you? Then we should get married as soon as possible." Yin was stunned by his quick and unwavering response. She had expected him to be shocked, perhaps even overwhelmed, despite his previous promise to take responsibility if she got pregnant. There was something strange about this, something she couldn't quite understand. Why are you so quick to agree to marriage?" she asked, confused. "You don't even look surprised." Jungkook leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes locked onto hers. "Because I have to take responsibility. Isn't that what you want? Or would you rather raise this child alone?" "Of course, I'm not surprised. We both know what happened that night, over and over again. This is the consequence we have to face." Yin fell silent. She stared at Jungkook's face, which showed no hesitation in accepting this situation. She exhaled softly. If Jungkook was truly willing to marry her, then maybe her life would be better. Finally, in a quiet voice, she said, "All right, I'll marry you." Jungkook looked at Yin for a moment before nodding. "All right, let me take you home. This time, let me walk you all the way to your house. I should talk to your parents about this." Jungkook had never been allowed to take Yin home before. He had never forced the issue either, because he knew from the start that there were secrets she was keeping. He had always played his part carefully, never pushing too hard so she wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Yin bit her lower lip. I can't go home." Jungkook frowned. "Why?" "My dad kicked me out." Jungkook froze in place. His wide eyes blinked once as if making sure he hadn't misheard. "What?" His voice was slightly hoarse. Yin kept her head down, her fingers intertwining nervously on her lap. "My dad kicked me out. He no longer acknowledges me as his daughter." Jungkook fell silent, a tightness forming in his chest. He had wanted Yin to suffer, to regret what she had done that led to his father's death, but he had never imagined she would actually lose her home. In his mind, maybe she would be scolded, but not completely cast out. "So, you have nowhere to go?" His voice was softer now, almost a whisper. Yin shook her head. "I haven't planned anything yet. He wouldn't even let me take my clothes. All I have with me now is my phone and the money in my wallet." Jungkook bit the inside of his cheek, his fists clenching unconsciously. This should have satisfied him. He should have been happy to see Yin like this. But why? Why was there this strange, piercing feeling in his chest? Taking a deep breath, Jungkook ran a frustrated hand through his hair. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. Yin frowned. "What?" Jungkook looked at her, his sharp gaze mixed with something else, something uncertain. Then, in a deeper voice, he said, "Come with me. Stay with me." "But..." "No buts, Yin." He cut her off firmly. "You're carrying my child. I'm not going to let you be homeless." In the end, Yin followed Jungkook. Before heading home, they stopped by a store to buy some clothes for her. Jungkook opened the door to his apartment and stepped inside, followed by Yin, who was still hesitant. "Come in." Jungkook's voice sounded flat as he took off his coat and hung it on the rack near the door. "Why did you choose to live here?" Yin asked, curious. They had exchanged messages over the phone before, but recently, they hadn't had the chance to meet because Jungkook had been busy with work. Jungkook unbuttoned the top buttons of his shirt and walked to the kitchen to get a drink. "Because it's close to my office," he answered casually. "My dad leaves for work at 10, while I have to be at the office by 8. If I lived at home, I'd have to leave earlier, and I don't like wasting time on the road." Yin nodded slowly. It made sense. She put her shopping bag, which contained the new clothes Jungkook had bought for her, on the sofa. As she looked around, something caught her by surprise. Jungkook, Yin turned to him. This apartment only has one bedroom? Jungkook sipped his drink before placing the glass on the kitchen table. Yeah, he answered briefly. Yin swallowed. So, we have to sleep in the same bedroom? Jungkook looked at her, then shrugged as if it was no big deal. Yeah, why? No guest room? If there was, I would have had you sleep there. Jungkook's answer left Yin silent. She didn't know whether to feel relieved or even more awkward. You go shower first, Jungkook said, walking toward the bedroom. I still need to finish some work. Yin sighed and followed his steps into the bedroom. After grabbing her clothes, she immediately went into the bathroom to freshen up. When she came out, she saw that Jungkook was sitting on the edge of the bed, with his laptop open, deeply focused on his work. Where do I sleep? Yin asked carefully. Jungkook glanced at the bed, then looked back at her. Here. You sleep here too? Of course. This is my bed, he answered nonchalantly, going back to focusing on his laptop. But if you have a problem with it, feel free to sleep on the sofa, he interrupted without looking at her. But I'm sure you won't be comfortable in this condition. Yin bit her lip, realizing that Jungkook was right. She was pregnant, and sleeping on the sofa wasn't a good idea. But sleeping in the same bed as Jungkook also felt awkward. Finally, with some hesitation, Yin climbed into the bed and pulled the duvet over herself. She faced away from Jungkook, trying to get comfortable, while he remained busy with his laptop. Several minutes passed in silence, until eventually, Yin heard the sound of Jungkook closing his laptop. You don't need to be so tense, his voice sounded in the stillness. Yin remained silent, but her heart started to beat faster. I won't do anything, Jungkook continued in a flat tone, so just sleep. Yin finally sighed in relief. Without answering, she closed her eyes and allowed herself to sink into exhaustion. Jungkook watched Yin's back for a moment before lying down as well, pulling the same duvet with her. That night, they slept in the same bed, though still separated by some distance. The next morning, Yin woke up feeling anxious when she saw that the clock showed 7:30. As her eyes opened, she felt her body was a bit tired, and her mind was still shaken by the events of yesterday. After struggling with sleepiness and exhaustion, she hurriedly got out of bed and left the room. As soon as she stepped into the dining area, Yin saw that Jungkook was already sitting at the table, enjoying a cup of coffee while holding his tablet. On the table, breakfast was ready, toast and eggs, still steaming. The aroma was appetizing, although Yin felt a little awkward for being late. Jungkook, Yin said quietly, feeling worried about being late. I just woke up. I'm sorry if I disappointed you. Jungkook turned to her, his eyes slightly narrowing as if assessing her condition. It's okay, he replied gently. You're pregnant, maybe tired after what happened yesterday. I understand. Yin felt a wave of relief upon hearing his words. Jungkook wasn't angry or upset, even though he knew they should have had breakfast earlier. It seemed like he understood that Yin was going through a difficult time. Thank you, Yin said softly. Her feelings of guilt began to lessen after hearing Jungkook speak so kindly. I just feel strange. I should have woken up earlier. Don't worry, you're pregnant, and you had a lot to deal with yesterday, Jungkook reassured her. Yin felt warmth in his words. Somehow, she felt a little lighter, as if her burdens had lessened just by receiving support from him. Come on, eat first, Jungkook said, handing her a plate. We'll talk more later. Yin nodded and sat down, starting her breakfast. Even though there was still some worry in her, she felt a little better after hearing Jungkook's concern. Everything seemed a bit lighter now, thanks to his understanding and attention. After a brief silence, Jungkook broke the quiet. Tonight, we'll go to my parents' house. We'll talk about our marriage. Yin was surprised to hear this, but slowly, she realized that this was a step they had to take. All right, I'm ready, she replied, though a nervous feeling began to rise within her. That night, Yin and Jungkook sat side by side in the living room of his family home. The atmosphere in the room was tense and silent. Jungkook's stepfather sat with a serious expression, while his mother looked at them with eyes full of shock. What did you just say? His stepfather's voice was deep and pressing. Jungkook remained calm. With a firm voice, he repeated, Yin is carrying my child. I'm going to marry her. Jungkook's mother covered her mouth with her hand, visibly shaken. Jungkook, how did this happen? How could you get someone's daughter pregnant without marriage? Yin lowered her head, feeling guilty. Her hands tightly gripped the hem of her shirt, trying to suppress her nervousness and embarrassment. Jungkook glanced at her and slowly took her hand, squeezing it gently as if to reassure her that everything would be okay. His father let out a long sigh, then stared at Jungkook sharply. I never expected you to do something like this. You've always been responsible, but this time, you couldn't even control yourself. Jungkook remained silent. He had no intention of defending himself and no words to explain or deny the accusations thrown at him. His plan for revenge against Yin, the hatred he had harbored and carefully planned because she had shot and killed his biological father, remained a secret. No one knew his true reason for marrying Yin. In front of his family, he only wanted one thing, their blessing for the marriage. I'm not asking for your approval. Jungkook finally spoke in a low but firm tone. I'm only asking for your blessing, because no matter what, I will marry her. Silence filled the room once more. His parents exchanged glances, still in shock over this revelation. Yin, on the other hand, felt an overwhelming tension in her chest, though she had expected Jungkook's family to react this way. His father finally let out a long breath. The deep lines on his face became more prominent as he looked at Jungkook in silence. His mother still seemed slightly shaken, but her expression gradually softened. She looked at Yin, who was still bowing her head, before turning back to her son. If this is truly your decision, and this is your way of taking responsibility, then we have no reason to refuse, his father finally said. We accept it. His mother added, yes, you should take responsibility, Jungkook. Yin lifted her face in surprise, not expecting them to agree so quickly. Jungkook remained silent, not showing any excessive reaction. He knew his parents must have thought this marriage was solely out of obligation, but only he knew the real reason, the vengeance he hid inside. So, when do you plan to get married? His father asked again, looking at both of them seriously. Jungkook glanced at Yin for a moment before answering firmly, as soon as possible. Yin was once again startled by his answer, but she said nothing. Everything was happening so fast and suddenly, yet she had no other choice. There was only one thing she hoped for, that this time, she could truly find happiness, because at least she had managed to escape from her father's house, where she had endured years of suffering. Their wedding took place quickly and was celebrated only with Jungkook's family, without the presence of Yin's relatives. The ceremony was grand, considering Jungkook's stepfather had an extensive network of business associates. Yin wore a luxurious white gown, though her body felt exhausted due to her pregnancy. Meanwhile, Jungkook stood beside her with an unreadable expression. His smile appeared sweet in the eyes of the guests, but behind it, there was something darker that he kept hidden. After the long and exhausting wedding celebration, Yin finally arrived in the room with Jungkook. As soon as the door closed, she let out a tired sigh, removing the veil that still adorned her head. Her feet ached after standing all day, smiling at guests, most of whom she didn't even know. It's finally over, she murmured softly, glancing at Jungkook, who stood near the wardrobe, slowly unbuttoning his shirt. But something was different. Jungkook hadn't said a word since they entered the room. No goodnight, no small gestures of care as he had shown before. His sudden cold demeanor sent a shiver through her. Yin bit her lip hesitantly. Jungkook, she called softly. The man paused for a moment, then turned to her with a blank expression. What? Just one word, devoid of tone, devoid of emotion. A strange chill crept through Yin's body. This wasn't the Jungkook she had come to know. This felt like a different version of him. Are you okay? She asked cautiously. Jungkook let out a small chuckle, but it lacked warmth. Shouldn't I be asking you that? You're the one who's pregnant, aren't you? His voice carried a sharp undertone, almost mocking. Yin fell silent. Something in his gaze made her heart pound with unease. I just feel like you're different, she admitted. Jungkook didn't respond immediately. He draped his discarded shirt over a chair before slowly approaching Yin. The closer he got, the more she could feel the cold aura surrounding him. When he finally stood right in front of her, Yin almost took a step back, but before she could move, Jungkook lifted his hand and tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. Different? He repeated, his voice low and sharp. I don't think so. I'm just showing you my true self. Yin swallowed hard, suddenly feeling short of breath. Jungkook, what's wrong with you? His gaze bore into hers, empty, devoid of the warmth she had grown accustomed to. Then, without warning, he released her chin and turned away, walking towards the bed. I'm tired, he said flatly. Go to sleep. Yin remained frozen in place, staring at Jungkook's back as he shut himself off completely. For the first time, she felt a sense of danger around him, but she shook her head, trying to dismiss the thought. Hopefully, it was just her imagination. After their marriage, Jungkook truly changed. Back when they were dating, he had been gentle, his eyes filled with warmth, his smile always comforting, and his sweet words never failed to make Yin happy. But after they got married, everything changed. Jungkook became cold, as if the only emotions he had left were anger and impatience. Yin sat at the dining table, staring at the warm toast she had just made. Her hands trembled slightly as she stirred Jungkook's coffee. She had grown accustomed to his distant attitude, yet it still hurt every time he treated her so indifferently. The bedroom door opened, and Jungkook's footsteps echoed across the floor. Without glancing at Yin, he headed straight for the front door. "Jungkook, aren't you going to have breakfast?" Yin's voice was soft, almost a whisper. She turned to him, hoping for even the slightest acknowledgement. Jungkook paused for a moment near the dining table, but didn't look at her. His voice was flat when he answered, "No." Yin took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I made breakfast for you. Your coffee is ready too." Jungkook glanced at her briefly before sighing in annoyance. "I'll eat at the office." Hearing that, Yin hurriedly approached him. "All right then, be careful," she said, reaching out to straighten his tie. But before her fingers could touch the fabric, Jungkook suddenly grabbed her wrist tightly. "Don't you dare touch me with those filthy hands," he spat, his jaw clenched. Yin's eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean, Jungkook? Why would you say that?" Jungkook's gaze burned with cold fury as he yanked his hand away. "Your dirty hands don't deserve to touch me. I refuse to let them." His eyes turned red, filled with suppressed rage. "If you weren't pregnant, I would have broken that hand of yours already. Just so you know." With those cruel words, he stormed out, leaving Yin standing there, trembling. She looked down at her hands, her gaze sorrowful. Unconsciously, tears started rolling down her cheeks. Her mind spun in panic. Why would Jungkook say that? Suddenly, her breath hitched. Fear crept into her chest. Did Jungkook know? No, it wasn't possible. She had hidden her past and her family's background well. Nothing had gone wrong all this time. Her legs felt weak as she carefully lowered herself onto a chair. No, Jungkook shouldn't know. But how? How could he possibly know? That night, Yin entered the bedroom after spending some time on the balcony, enjoying the cool night air. She knew Jungkook had just arrived home now. He stood in front of the wardrobe, unbuttoning his shirt. Yin swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice steady. "Jungkook, can we talk for a moment?" Jungkook glanced at her, his expression bored. "Talk." Yin froze in place, her chest tightening. She didn't understand what had happened. What had made Jungkook change so drastically? Why did the man who used to hold her so warmly now refuse to even look at her? She didn't want to believe her suspicions were true, that Jungkook had found out about her. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She didn't want to cry. She didn't want to look weak. But the truth was, she was weak, especially in her current condition. Yin bit her lip. "Why have you changed?" Her voice trembled. "Why are you treating me like this?" Jungkook frowned and clicked his tongue in irritation. "What do you mean by changed?" His tone was indifferent, as if he truly didn't care. "You weren't like this before." Yin clutched the hem of her shirt tightly. "You used to be kind to me. You cared about me. But now, you won't even look at me. You used to hold me all the time. But now I can't even touch you. Do you hate my hands? Is it because I did something wrong?" Jungkook let out a cold chuckle. "Why are you asking me? Have you never felt like you did something wrong?" He deliberately avoided answering directly. He wanted her to reveal the truth. Yin's breath hitched, and she grew more anxious. "What have I done, Jungkook? Tell me." She bit her lower lip, afraid to say the wrong thing. If she confessed now, would it be the right move? Jungkook held her gaze with a sharp, challenging look, waiting for her to break first. Then, a smirk formed on his lips, though his eyes remained just as piercing. "Don't ask me. I want to hear your confession." His tone was laced with challenge. Yin remained still, unmoving. What was she supposed to confess? There were too many dark secrets about herself and her family that she had kept hidden until now. She was confused. Which one should she reveal? Suddenly, her head throbbed in pain. She wasn't ready to expose everything. Jungkook smirked coldly as he stepped closer. "I'll let you confess your sins on your own. So don't ask me. I want you to admit it yourself." Yin's breath caught in her throat. "So, all this time, you've been pretending with me?" she asked, her voice weak, almost a whisper. Jungkook's face now wore the anger he had been holding back. "Did you really think I loved you? Did you honestly believe I wanted to marry you?" Yin felt her body weaken further. Her heart pounded in her chest, and pain spread across her torso. "But, you said..." "I've said many things to you," Jungkook cut in coldly, but it was all just empty words. Tears that she had held back finally fell. "Then, why did you marry me?" Jungkook turned his face away, not wanting to see the tears in her eyes. "Because I wanted to see you suffer." Yin's world seemed to crumble as she heard those words. She shook her head in disbelief. "That's not possible." Believe me, that's the truth. Jungkook's gaze was as cold as ice. And I will never love you. Not now, not ever. Yin collapsed to the floor, her hands clutching her chest, feeling suffocated. It was true. Her life would never be happy, not ever. Why? Why are you doing this to me? Jungkook glared at her. I already told you. Admit your mistake. Don't ask me. He stared at her for a moment before turning and walking into the bathroom, leaving Yin crying alone on the floor. That night, Yin realized her marriage wasn't a source of happiness. It was a trap, and Jungkook was a man who would never love her. Day by day passed. Without realizing it, Yin's pregnancy had already reached 5 months. However, she could feel her body growing weaker. Even the simplest movements became difficult. She wanted to ask Jungkook for help, but she knew he wouldn't care. Yin sat on the bed, feeling restless. Suddenly, she felt the urge to use the bathroom, and with difficulty, walked toward it, her steps unsteady. As soon as she reached the bathroom, her legs gave out, causing her to fall hard onto the cold tiles. A sharp pain shot through her abdomen. Then, she felt something wet between her legs. When she looked down, her heart stopped. Her hands trembled as she held her stomach, her breathing ragged. No, my baby. Just as Jungkook was about to enter their bedroom, he froze upon hearing her desperate cries. Without hesitation, he rushed inside, only to find Yin collapsed on the bathroom floor, pooling beneath her. Yin. His voice was filled with panic as he hurried to her side, scooping her into his arms before rushing her to the hospital. Upon arrival, Yin was immediately taken into emergency care. Jungkook sat in the waiting area, his hands clenched tightly together, his head hanging low. His mind was in chaos. The image of Yin lying in a pool of blood refused to leave his thoughts. The fear, the guilt, everything felt suffocating. Why was this happening again to him? After what felt like an eternity, a doctor finally emerged from the emergency room, his expression tired but composed. Jungkook shot up from his seat, his eyes filled with desperation. Doctor, how is my wife? His voice was hoarse. The doctor took a deep breath before responding. We did everything we could. We managed to stop the bleeding, but he hesitated, as if reluctant to continue. But what, doctor? Jungkook's tone was urgent. We couldn't save the baby. Your wife suffered a miscarriage. The world around Jungkook seemed to freeze. A crushing weight pressed against his chest, making it hard to breathe. His fists clenched so tightly that his nails dug into his palms. He inhaled sharply, trying to suppress the storm of emotions raging within him. Before he could fully process the devastating news, the doctor spoke again. There is one more thing, Mr. Jungkook. We conducted a thorough examination of the patient's injuries since it seems she suffered a severe fall, and we discovered that her spinal cord has sustained a serious injury. Jungkook's heart pounded violently. His entire body went rigid. If she doesn't undergo surgery soon, there's a high chance she will suffer from permanent paralysis, either paraplegia or quadriplegia, depending on the extent of the injury. Jungkook felt as if the air had been sucked out of his lungs. His voice came out barely above a whisper. Paralyzed, he shook his head in disbelief. No, that's impossible. The doctor gave him a solemn nod. From our examinations, it appears that her spine had already suffered multiple traumas in the past. It seems she's been subjected to physical abuse for a long time. That's why her back was already in a fragile state. The fall only made it worse. Jungkook's brows furrowed. His heart pounded against his ribcage. Physical abuse? Who hurt Yin? He had never laid a hand on her. His mind swirled with questions, but now was not the time for answers. Right now, Yin needed help. That was all that mattered. Doctor, please do the surgery, he ordered, his voice firm. No matter the cost, I'll pay for it. The doctor nodded. Understood. We'll schedule the operation as soon as possible. Please be patient. The next morning, Jungkook stared at Yin's fragile body lying on the hospital bed. Her face was pale, her breathing steady, but she looked so weak. An IV drip was attached to her left hand. Sitting at the edge of the bed, Jungkook couldn't take his eyes off her face. Slowly, Yin opened her eyes. Her vision was blurry at first before finally focusing on Jungkook's figure beside her. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to speak, but her voice came out hoarse and weak. Jungkook. Jungkook reached for her hand, holding it tightly. I'm here. Are you awake? How do you feel? Yin tried to move her body, but the moment she did, her expression turned to panic. Her eyes widened as she attempted to move her legs, but there was no response. Jungkook, my legs, I can't move them. Why? And what about my baby? Why is my stomach flat? Where is my baby? Jungkook bit his lip, searching for the right words. Yin, you fell in the bathroom and suffered a severe back injury. The doctor said your spinal cord was damaged. And you also had a miscarriage. Yin froze. Her weak hands clutched Jungkook's arm. No, this can't be happening. I can't be paralyzed. The doctors did everything to save you, Jungkook said quickly. But for now, you'll have to use a wheelchair until you fully recover. Tears welled up in Yin's eyes. She lowered her head, biting her trembling lips. I don't want to lose my baby. I don't want to lose my legs. Why is this happening to me? Jungkook looked at her, feeling a mix of emotions. His resentment was still there, but for the first time, something felt different. The pain in Yin's eyes wasn't an act. She was truly suffering. He let out a long sigh. The doctor said there's still a chance for you to recover. I'll stay with you through the therapy. Yin looked at him, her eyes filled with confusion and despair. Why? Why do you suddenly care about me? Jungkook didn't answer. He himself didn't know why he couldn't bear to see her like this. That night, heavy rain poured down, and thunder roared across the sky. In his apartment, Jungkook sat in the living room with a blank stare. He still couldn't process what had happened. Yin, the woman he had despised and wanted to destroy, was now lying weak in the bedroom. Jungkook ran a rough hand over his face, trying to push away the thoughts swirling in his mind. He should feel satisfied seeing Yin suffer, but why did something in his heart feel so heavy? The next morning, Jungkook went to the balcony, where Yin was enjoying the morning air, accompanied by a maid sent by his parents. As soon as the maid noticed Jungkook's presence, she quickly excused herself, giving them privacy. Yin turned to him with an empty gaze. What are you doing here? Why haven't you left for work yet? Jungkook remained silent for a moment before stepping closer. Making sure you're still alive, he replied coldly. Yin let out a long sigh. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but she held them back. I lost our baby. Jungkook looked at her. Something inside him ached upon hearing those words. He lowered his head, clenching his own fingers tightly. I know. You don't have to pretend to care. I know you hate me. Her voice was weak, but the pain in it was undeniable. Jungkook clenched his fists. I'm not pretending, he said flatly. You needed surgery, and you had it. Now, you need therapy to walk again. Yin looked down at her legs, still covered by a thin blanket. She felt nothing. So, I'm really paralyzed? Jungkook averted his gaze. I already told you. The doctor said you can recover with therapy. Yin let out a bitter chuckle. How ironic. I used to think I could escape from my dad's house, but now, I can't even stand on my own. Jungkook was shocked. Those words made him realize something. He had always seen Yin as his enemy, the person who had killed his father. But now, he began to wonder, what had actually happened in Yin's life before they got married? What do you mean? Jungkook asked. Yin looked at him, exhausted. You don't need to know. You hate me, don't you? So don't waste your time feeling sorry for me. Jungkook fell silent. He was supposed to not care, but why did his chest feel so tight, seeing Yin like this? The following night, since there was only one bedroom, the maid who worked for them only came during the day and left in the evening. Jungkook brought Yin's dinner to their room and found her sitting motionless by the window. Her eyes were empty, like someone who had lost all hope. He placed the tray on the small table. Eat. Yin didn't respond. Her gaze remained fixed on the dark night sky. Jungkook sighed. If you don't eat, you'll only get weaker. Don't you want to get better? Yin let out a bitter smile. Jungkook, I'm tired. Jungkook frowned. What do you mean? He asked as he sat down near her wheelchair. Yin turned her gaze to Jungkook. I'm tired of fighting. I don't even know why I'm holding on anymore. Every time I think my life will get better, something always destroys it. I have no one, and now, I can't even walk. I don't want to live like this. Jungkook was stunned by her words. Something inside his chest ached deeply. Without thinking, he reached out and held Yin's hand tightly. Don't say that. Yin looked down at their joined hands, then back at Jungkook with confusion in her eyes. Why? Don't you hate me? Isn't this what you wanted? To see me suffer? Jungkook couldn't answer. He didn't even know what he was feeling anymore. He was supposed to be satisfied seeing Yin like this. He should be happy that his revenge had come true. But why did he feel so uneasy? His heart was drowning in confusion. He wasn't sure anymore if he truly hated Yin, or if something else was beginning to grow inside him. At that moment, Jungkook looked straight into Yin's eyes. Why did you kill my dad, Yin? The words finally slipped from his lips. Yin's eyes widened in shock. What do you mean, Jungkook? I killed your dad? She was stunned. All this time, she had tried to forget that incident, refusing to believe that Jungkook was connected to the old man she had shot back then. Holding back his emotions, Jungkook continued. You must remember the man at the city park that day. You shot him. That man was my dad. Yin's eyes widened even more. That was your dad? But I didn't know he was your dad. Even your last names are different. Yes, because I didn't take my dad's surname. My parents divorced when I was in high school, so I took my mom's last name, Jungkook explained. Yin fell silent. Her throat felt dry, and she was at a complete loss for words. This was a scenario far worse than she had ever imagined. Now, I want you to tell me everything. The reason you did it, Jungkook demanded firmly. I don't even know where to start. Yin's voice trembled. Jungkook, I didn't know the man I killed was your dad. Jungkook frowned, confused. What do you mean? He asked, his tone slightly softer. Yin hesitated, gathering the courage to tell the truth. My dad, he forced me to do it. I had no other choice. If I didn't, he would have kept torturing me, beating me without mercy. Jungkook remained silent, his heart tightening at her words. Yin, his wife, had lived a life darker than he could have ever imagined. With a trembling voice, Yin continued, I was adopted from an orphanage. When my adoptive mom was still alive, I was treated well, even by my dad. But everything changed after she died. From then on, I was trained to become a killer. My dad never saw me as his daughter again. To him, I was just a tool, a pawn for his revenge, someone he could use for his plans. And that day, he ordered me to kill someone. He said it was my first test, my initiation, to shoot a person. And the man I killed at the park turned out to be your dad. Jungkook felt like the world was spinning. He struggled to process everything. But why? He asked. Why did you follow his orders? Yin looked at Jungkook with tear-filled eyes. Because if I refused, he would have beaten me again. He never gave me a chance to escape. Jungkook, I had no choice but to obey him. I tried to run away so many times, but he always found me. And every time he dragged me back home, he would beat me endlessly. Jungkook bit his lip, his heart shattering. Everything he had believed in was nothing like the truth. He took a deep breath, trying to understand. So, your dad, he had a grudge against my dad? That's why he ordered you to kill him? Jungkook asked. Yin nodded, her face weary and filled with regret. Yes, they were enemies, but I never knew why. I asked, but my father never answered. My only task was to shoot him. If I didn't, I would be the one suffering his wrath. Jungkook closed his eyes for a moment, trying to understand, even though every word Yin spoke felt like it was breaking his heart. He couldn't begin to imagine the pain she had endured, a life filled with violence, suffering, and emotional wounds that never healed. After hearing everything, Jungkook felt even more lost. He looked at Yin, a woman who seemed so fragile, a victim in this cruel game, just like him. The hatred he had nurtured toward her suddenly felt meaningless. What was he supposed to do now? Blame Yin, when she had been trapped in a life she never chose? So, you never had a choice? Jungkook asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Yin nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I had no choice. All I ever wanted was to live in peace, without pain constantly destroying me. Jungkook fell silent. His mind was in turmoil, everything he had believed in up until now shattering before his eyes. This new truth overwhelmed him, making it impossible to think clearly. Without another word, he turned around and left the room, needing to be alone to cool his thoughts. Yin watched as Jungkook disappeared behind the door, then lowered her head. I'm sorry, Jungkook, she whispered, her voice trembling as she began to sob quietly, all alone. After crying alone for 30 minutes, Yin finally turned her wheelchair, deciding to leave the room and approach Jungkook, who was sitting alone on the sofa. Slowly, she moved closer. Jungkook, I'm sorry for shooting your dad. I've already told you why I did it. Please forgive me. I just want to be happy with you. Maybe you only made me fall in love with you on purpose, but now, I truly love you. Carefully, Yin reached out to touch Jungkook's hand, already preparing herself for the possibility that he would push her away again, just like before. But this time, he didn't. He remained silent, his gaze fixed straight ahead. Jungkook remained silent for a moment, as if trying to process every word Yin had said. His heart was still filled with confusion. But when he saw the tears welling up in Yin's eyes, something inside him slowly crumbled. He let out a deep sigh before finally turning to her, his expression unreadable. I wanted to hate you. I wanted to keep blaming you for my dad's death. But after hearing everything, I realized you were a victim too. Yin bit her lip, holding back her sobs. I'm truly sorry, Jungkook. Jungkook gazed at her deeply, and without saying anything else, he reached for Yin's hand, which was still hovering in the air, and held it tightly. Yin was startled, not expecting Jungkook to return her touch. I forgive you. Jungkook's voice was hoarse as if those words were difficult for him to say. I don't know if I can forget everything so quickly, but I don't want to hate you anymore. Yin's tears finally fell, but this time, not from sorrow but relief. Thank you, Jungkook, she whispered. Jungkook looked at the woman in front of him, realizing just how much suffering she had endured. Without thinking, his hand moved to wipe away the tears streaming down her face. I don't want to see you cry anymore, he said softly. For the first time since everything began, Yin felt a glimmer of hope. A hope that maybe, just maybe, they could start over. A few days after their heavy conversation that revealed so many truths, the atmosphere in their home felt different. Yin was no longer as silent as before. There was a sense of relief in her after Jungkook admitted that he no longer hated her or planned to take revenge. But the world never stops moving. A piece of news arrived, deep and shocking, shattering the brief silence they had found. On a bright morning, as Jungkook and Yin sat at the dining table, a man named Taemin, Yin's father's assistant, arrived at their home. Taemin, why are you here? Did my dad send you? Yin asked, anxiety evident in her voice. She feared that her father had ordered something cruel again. Jungkook, noticing Yin's unease, took her hand in his. Tell him that Yin is my responsibility now. He has no right to summon her as he pleases. Yin was stunned by Jungkook's words. A warmth spread in her chest as she realized that Jungkook was protecting her now. I didn't come for that, Taemin replied. I came to inform you that Mr. Park was found dead in his office yesterday afternoon. Both Yin and Jungkook were shocked, but for Yin, the news was even more unbelievable. What do you mean? How did he die? From the reports I received, Mr. Park was killed by his business rival Kwon Soo-hyuk. I don't know how that man managed to enter the mansion. But I came to tell you this because you are Mr. Park's only child. If you wish, you may attend his funeral tomorrow. I'll take my leave now. After her father's assistant left, Yin remained frozen in disbelief. Her father, who was always so cautious and meticulous, had been killed by one of his enemies. Her hands trembled, but no tears fell from her eyes. Jungkook, seeing Yin bowing her head in silence on her wheelchair, crouched in front of her so he could meet her eyes. He held both of her hands tightly. Shouldn't you feel relieved? You're finally free from him. Yin stiffly nodded. I should feel relieved, but it still feels suffocating to hear this news. She took a deep breath before continuing. And you? You must be happy to hear this. Jungkook let out a slow sigh. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. At first, I wanted to take revenge on your father myself, but now, someone else has already done it. I don't have to dirty my hands. Yin fell silent for a moment, staring at Jungkook. Jungkook, am I a terrible person? I didn't even cry when I heard about his death. Jungkook shook his head. You don't have to cry if you don't want to. After everything he put you through, no one can blame you. Now, let's finish breakfast. After this, we need to go to the hospital for your therapy. 1 month later, the rehabilitation room was quiet, filled only with the soft sound of slow footsteps and Yin's occasional heavy breaths. Jungkook stood beside her, holding her hand firmly, guiding her as she struggled to stand and walk. On the other side, a nurse therapist observed them closely, ensuring that the walking exercise proceeded safely. Yin tried to take steps one by one, but her body still felt weak. The fear of falling lingered in her mind. Her legs trembled occasionally, nearly losing balance. But every time that happened, Jungkook swiftly caught her, pulling her into his embrace. Slow down, I'm here, Jungkook whispered, his voice soft and reassuring. Yin took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. She looked at Jungkook for a moment, her eyes filled with gratitude and hope. Slowly, she tried again, though hesitation was still evident in her movements. After a few more steps, Yin nearly stumbled once more. Instinctively, Jungkook pulled her close, making her feel the warmth of his body. Don't push yourself too hard, Jungkook whispered near her ear. I don't want you to get hurt because of this. Yin nodded slightly, but her heart trembled. The Jungkook, who was once cold and filled with resentment, now stood by her side, protecting her without hesitation. The nurse therapist smiled at their interaction. You're making great progress, Miss Yin. With regular practice, I'm confident you'll be able to walk normally again. Yin looked at Jungkook, searching for reassurance in his gaze. He gave her a small smile. I'll keep helping you until you can walk on your own, he said with certainty. So don't give up. Warmth spread through Yin's heart. For the first time in a long while, she truly felt that she was no longer alone. Jungkook was here, with her. 3 months later, the sea breeze blew gently, carrying the distinct salty scent of the ocean, while the waves rolled in slowly, touching the sand with a calming rhythm. The sunset sky was painted in hues of gold and orange, creating a warm and peaceful atmosphere. At the edge of the beach, Yin stood on her own defeat, now fully healed. She gazed at the vast ocean with bright eyes, savoring the freedom that had once been taken from her. Jungkook stood beside her, watching her with a rare, soft smile on his lips. Seeing Yin stand without any assistance filled his heart with relief. It had been a long journey, one filled with pain, tears, and regret. But now, they were here, together, with no hatred between them. "You've really recovered," Jungkook said softly, his voice filled with pride. Yin turned to him, a small smile forming on her lips. "Thank you. This is all because you never left my side. You kept your promise." Jungkook exhaled deeply, then looked into her eyes. "It's not just about keeping my promise. I want to be with you, whether you're sick or healthy." Hearing those words, Yin felt her heart race. The ocean breeze lifted a few strands of her hair, prompting Jungkook to instinctively reach up and tuck them behind her ear. His touch was gentle, and when their eyes met, there was something undeniable between them, an emotion they could no longer ignore. Unconsciously, the space between them grew smaller. Jungkook's gaze flickered to Yin's lips for a moment before returning to her eyes, as if silently asking for permission. And Yin didn't pull away. He leaned in slightly, and finally, his lips met hers in a soft, lingering kiss. It was warm, slow, and filled with emotion, as if he wanted to erase all the pain of the past and replace it with something new. As the kiss deepened, his tongue slipped past her lips, exploring her mouth with a passionate yet gentle touch. Yin closed her eyes, responding to him with equal longing. There was no more resentment, no more sorrow. Only the two of them, standing beneath the sunset sky. Let it witness the beginning of something new between them.